So in today's video, we are going to be discussing what is going to happen with Baker Mayfield. Now, before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and let's just jump right into the video. Now, before we can answer the question, what's going to happen to Baker Mayfield? Because obviously Baker's not going to be playing in Cleveland anymore. Cleveland, they have their new quarterback. They got Deshaun Watson, which obviously means that the Cleveland Browns are going to be looking for a team to trade Baker Mayfield with and move off of him, because I don't think that the Browns aren't going to want him on their roster going into next season. So the Browns are going to find a candidate, a team that will be willing to trade for Baker Mayfield. Now, there is a few issues with that, because if you look at the teams that need a quarterback, they kind of got that position filled. The Falcons, when they got rid of Matt Ryan, traded him to the Colts. They found Marcus Mariota. The Colts, obviously, when they got rid of Carson Wentz, they traded for Matt Ryan themselves. Washington, they got Carson Wentz now. You have the Saints, who got Jameis Winston back. And then a team that was going to need a quarterback going into next season, but they finally have their quarterback, and that's the Denver Broncos. So as you can tell, the pool of teams is very small now, of teams that are needing a quarterback. Now, there are obviously teams that in the future would love to upgrade at quarterback, but if we're looking just strictly right now, almost every team has the quarterback that they're going to use and the quarterback they're going to play going into next season. So if we're looking at there's literally two teams right now that I think Baker Mayfield has even a small shot of going to right now. There's one in particular that I don't think he's going to have any chance of going to, and then the other one is going to be a mess, but is really the only realistic place for him to go. The two teams are the Carolina Panthers and the Seattle Seahawks. Now, when it comes to the Panthers, that situation is probably never going to happen with regards of them trading for Baker Mayfield. They have Sam Darnold under contract, and Sam Darnold's an $18 million cap hit, and if they cut Sam Darnold, he's going to be that much in dead cap too. He's going to have an $18 million dead cap. So when it comes to the Panthers, they're not going to be able to move off of Sam Darnold, because that's just a huge hit that they don't want to take. They're just going to have to suck it up for another year. Now they don't want to be taking on two contracts with Baker Mayfield also making about the same amount as Sam Darnold. So the Panthers, they don't want to be paying that much money for two quarterbacks that are going to be on the same roster. There's just no point of it. It's a bad financial situation. And the reports that the Panthers were out of the Baker sweepstakes, if you could even call it that, already. And so the Panthers, they just have no interest in taking and trading for Baker Mayfield, which leaves literally the only team that Baker Mayfield could be traded to, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. And that situation, if you ask me, is going to be a mess, because there was rumors and reports that Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll, they got into it before Russell Wilson ended up in Denver. And if Russell Wilson was having issues with Pete Carroll, who's a ginormous personality in the NFL, imagine what Baker is going to be with Pete Carroll in a situation that is a million times worse than what's in Cleveland. Cleveland, in my opinion, before they got Deshaun Watson, and even now that they have Deshaun Watson, is kind of a mess. But I think, as weird as it is, the Browns had a more stable situation than the Seattle Seahawks do right now, because the Seahawks are, in my opinion, on the brink of just exploding, because they just lost Russell Wilson. It was a terrible year that hasn't been pretty for the Seattle Seahawks the last couple of years. Russell Wilson not getting any protection, not getting any offensive line help. And it's just the defense of the Seattle Seahawks being really, really bad and having really no run game, which is the primary thing that Pete Carroll likes to do. It's a struggle in Seattle right now. And then you bring on a disgruntled Baker Mayfield, who is a ginormous personality himself. Like, you look at everything that's happened with Baker just this offseason. He requested a trade out of Cleveland once he found out that they were talking to Deshaun Watson. So obviously that part makes sense. Like, you're going to want to move off of the team that you're on once you know that another quarterback is going to come in, and you're probably not going to be the quarterback of the team. But then that trade got immediately denied. Like, it literally took no time at all. And I'm not talking like a couple days. Literally, it felt like within a couple minutes that trade was shot down. That trade request was shot down immediately, and it was denied. And then there was this thing with Baker Mayfield, like, he doesn't have, and then there's this thing with Baker Mayfield, who doesn't have a no trade clause like Deshaun Watson. So he has literally no say in where he goes. He could literally end up at the Houston Texans for all we know. Like, that's probably the worst team in the NFL right now. That's where Baker Mayfield could end up, is the Texans. Like, Baker has literally zero say in where he decides he wants to go. But there was reports that he wanted to go to the Indianapolis Colts, and obviously that's not going to happen, and I don't think that probably would have happened either way, because you saw the Colts, they just moved off of Carson Wentz, and then and then they're going to go after Baker Mayfield. I don't think that personally makes really any sense. Like, you were frustrated with Carson Wentz. I think you're going to be even more frustrated with Baker Mayfield, if you ask me personally. Like, Carson Wentz, Baker Mayfield, they do not mix with what the Indianapolis Colts want. So that would have never worked to begin with. And then you have obviously the long post he put on Twitter, just kind of thanking the city, didn't know what the future beheld. It was kind of a messy situation. And apparently there was a report that Baker Mayfield also threatened to sit out the season with the Browns, and I'm like, that's kind of laughable, because if you ask me, Baker has done, in my opinion, nothing to earn that big contract, that big extension, whatever it is. He hasn't really earned that. Yes, if we're looking just at the Browns situation, they have been a historically bad franchise. They have been a complete mess, and Baker comes in, he's the quarterback who helps them get their first playoff win since like 1994. Like, we get all of that. But at the same time, you have to realize that in a way, these Browns aren't the same old Browns that were always a disaster, always a mess. They've actually gone out and they've tried to make moves. They had Austin Hooper, they had OBJ, they had Jarvis Landry, they have Nick Chubb, they had Kareem Hunt. They had all that talent on the team at one time, and one playoff win is kind of disappointing. Like, a part of me really does get it. Like, you're a terrible franchise for years and years and years, and then you finally get that playoff win, so you bolster the status of your quarterback. In a way, I completely understand that as a fan, but if you're looking from the NFL business side of it, the NFL GMs, the owners, they're going to look and be like, oh, this guy had all these weapons and only one playoff win, and they were a favorite to go to the Super Bowl this past season. And, unfortunately, the Baker Mayfield got injured. He got hurt. But at the same time, for Baker's sake, it really would have been smart for him to sit out this past season, if you ask me personally. Now, I've talked to people and they've brought it up, on Twitter, that, I've interacted with them, and they said, well, if Baker would have sat, in case Keenum would have came in and then they would have played better. Like, yeah, that in a way, that's going to happen. Baker was injured, and Case Keenum comes in, and he's literally just there for a placeholder until Baker gets hurt. Now, even if Case Keenum had a spectacular season, I still think it would have been hard for Baker to lose his starting job coming into this season if he had decided to sit out and not play due to the injury. Like, it would have had to have taken a jaw-dropping performance by Case Keenum all season long for Baker Mayfield to not get his starting job back in Cleveland. That's my personal opinion. Like, Case Keenum would have had to come in. He would have had to have thrown 4 touchdowns a game, throw 300 yards, not turn the ball over, make a whole bunch of game-winning plays, playing pretty much perfect football for the stretch that he would have been in for Baker to lose it. So I don't think that Baker would have lost his starting job heading into this season, even if he was to sit out and get surgery, which I think personally Baker should have done. I really do. Like, some people say it's on the team to sit him. Like, I completely agree, but Baker, that's one, I guess, character trait that you can like about him. He's a tough dude. He's going to want to play. Like, that I have nothing wrong with. Like, I think that's great to have. But then you also have to understand, like, there's a point where you're hurting your career, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting the team by not sitting out, which he should have done. And I get it. I get every aspect of this. In a way, maybe the Cleveland Browns should have, put him on the injury report, not let him play. Baker should have sat out. It's a tough situation. But then if you go to the trade situation, it's going to be even tougher, I think, because the Browns are going to want something if he is traded, which again, I think the only team that Baker Mayfield can be traded to is the Seattle Seahawks, which again, I think is a mess. They have a bad offensive line, terrible defense, and no running game, which Baker Mayfield thrives with. So it's not going to be good. I mean, the only two redeeming qualities that I think the Seattle Seahawks honestly have right now is DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. But at the same time, Baker Mayfield isn't that kind of quarterback that elevates a team. It takes the guys around him to elevate Baker. So that's really going to be really, really tough, I think. So for the Browns, they're going to have to make a hard pitch to Seattle, which is the only team I realistically can see Baker Mayfield going to, and they're going to try to get something out of him. Like, they're not going to get a first round pick. The Browns are going to try to get a couple picks back because they gave up an arm and a leg for Deshaun Watson. So when they trade Baker, they're going to want something for Baker Mayfield from the Seattle Seahawks. Again, we don't know if this is going to happen, but again, I think the Seattle Seahawks are really the only team that Baker Mayfield can go to. So as a whole, I think right now for Baker Mayfield, what happens to him is he'll be traded. He'll more than likely go to the Seattle Seahawks. But just as a whole, Baker Mayfield, his career is in a complete mess right now. The dude has no idea what's going on with his career, and it's safe to say that there are a lot, as you can tell by free agency and the teams that needed a quarterback, and they already have one, a lot of teams passed up on him. So the future for Baker Mayfield is not looking very bright at all.